Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me today is a woman who is just a phenomenal young lady I've had a pleasure of knowing for a number of years. And this will be our first chance to really get into an intense, deep conversation. She's a mom. She's a counselor. She's definitely about her business as a woman of God. You can best believe that. And she's taking some time out of her busy schedule to be with us this evening to share a little bit about her journey in hopes of encouraging and inspiring and uplifting those of you who may be tuning in today to hear this story. So it is my privilege and honor and my pleasure, without any further ado, to introduce to you Miss Rachel Carey. Rachel, thank you so much for being on the show.
No problem. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to just share my testimony about the goodness of God.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what it's all about here. So I'm glad to have you aboard, and I appreciate you taking time out to do this. So before we jump into our segments, I do want to give our listeners an opportunity to know a little snippet about you, who you are, where you're from, what you do, whatever it is that you'd like to share. Kind of give them a taste of who is Rachel Carey.
Who am I? I'm a child of God. I love the Lord Jesus. I'm originally from New Orleans. I come from a big family. I am one of 13 kids. My parents, they had 13 of us. Actually, this year they celebrated their, I want to say, 52nd wedding anniversary or whatever. And so our family's pretty close. I do have a daughter. She is 22. She'll be 23 actually in December. She'll be 23 years old, and she's in between like college years and working and things like that. I am a counselor. I do Christian counseling, and I'll probably share a little bit more about this later. But it's called, the name of the business is Pathway to Freedom, and it is Christian counseling. And right now, I'm also working. Right now, I'm a certified counselor, but I'm working on getting my license as a clinical pastoral counselor. I'll be complete with that program with 3 more classes. So I'll be done by next year with that licensing for that. And right now, I mean, that's what I'm building. That's what the Lord has me building right now. And I know in the future, things are going to grow or whatever, but that's the space that I'm in right now. And yeah, I mean, that's about it, my current life. But, I'll get to share a bit about how I got here, as we move along.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I love that. Of course, I've been following you along on social media, and what you're doing is definitely a great work and a needed work.
Yeah.
It is always wonderful to see people operating in their gifts and just letting God use you in a mighty way. And you're doing it unapologetically and putting all efforts forth. And I just love to hear that about you. That's great stuff. So thank you for sharing that. So I'm a firm believer, when it comes to our journeys in life, you really can't get the true cusp, if you will, of the journey if you don't start from the beginning of where it all, comes from. I think that's a very essential part to all of our stories. And so at this particular time, I do want to take an opportunity to ask you to take us back. One of 13 children, close-knit family from Louisiana. Tell us, what was it like for you growing up? Fond memories that you have about growing up, as well as if there was any specific challenges that come to mind about growing up that you care to share with our audience. Please do at this time to kind of give us that backdrop of the beginning of your journey.
Yes, so I just want y'all to be alarmed that I've gone through a whole lot of stuff, and I'm not shy about sharing any of this information. I'm pretty transparent because I do believe that transparency opens the door for other people to be healed as well. And I know that everything that I've gone through, I didn't go through just for me. So, just bear with me as I share. And it's not anything that I'm like still struggling with, but I know some of it may be like a little bit sensitive to some people. But, I grew up in New Orleans, and I grew up in a cult. Like this church, this leader of the church, like he was very strict about everything. Everything was demonic. And like he had us serving God based on the fear of going to hell and not the love of God. And so in this church, my mom was the primary parent that went to it. My dad didn't go at all. So we kind of grew up in this divided home. My dad was in the world, my mom was in the church. And so we kind of had both worlds growing up in it, and very strict in the church because we couldn't do anything. We couldn't watch a whole lot of different things. Like they made our clothes. They like told us what to eat, told us where to go, what to watch, what to listen to. It was very, very strict. But then we have my dad who listens to all the music and watches all the movies and all that. So it was kind of confusing growing up like that. But I would say that the foundation of what we got from that church, having faith, we knew Jesus Christ, and we knew, just the basics of salvation and different things like that. But it was just a bunch of double-mindedness, and so which created instability in all of us, on top of growing up in a home with my father. And I know I said my parents are still married, but growing up in a home, there was a lot of abuse. It was dysfunctional. It was, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, like every abuse that you can imagine. We were witnesses to all of that. But the what was great about it, with so many of us, we grew up close. Like it was a 2-bedroom house with
Mm.
1 bathroom. I'm like, where did we even sleep? Like we joke about that to this day, but we were all, all in the house together. In the house until they were able to expand a double, and it was 4 bedrooms, but still 13 kids, and my parents too. So that's like it was always like 13 to 15 people in the house, because we did lose two of my brothers while we were young as well. My oldest brother and my youngest brother, one was 16 and one was 5 at the time. They passed away like over the years within that. So it was just a lot of struggles that we went through, but we kept that bind. We kept it close. But growing up in that church, it was very strict, and it dismantled when I was 14 years old, because the news came out that he was a pedophile. And I was his last victim and also his youngest victim. I was 14 years old when I was sexually molested by him. And the news about it came out eventually when I was 14, and I was one of the people who said something. And because I said something, 7 other girls came forward about it happening to them as well. And that church had been established 24 to 25 years prior to that, so I know it happened to many more people. And so just like in the midst of all that, having to, go to the doctor and having to talk to investigators, having to talk to lawyers and doctors and nurses and all these other things, even testifying in court as a 14-year-old girl, nowhere in the midst of that anyone stopped to tell me that I did not deserve that and it wasn't my fault.
Mm.
And so for the next 14 years of my life, I carried it, that I must have done something bad to deserve this, because that's what he taught. Bad things happen to bad people. And so I must have done something to deserve this. Is what I carried for the next 14 years of my life. And so that's kind of how my life kind of got off track when I was 14 years old, when all that happened. Became really rebellious and just started kind of spinning out of control. And I don't know if you want to ask me another question in between, or if you want me to just keep going.
Well, I mean, I'm letting you get this out. I mean, I'm already intrigued. I mean, first of all, let me first and foremost say I appreciate your transparency. You stated right out the gate that you had no problem being transparent, and you've done just that. And so much you've just tapped into just right now that we can unpack here. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, first off, big family, close knit, but then, and this happens quite often, unfortunately, where one parent in church, one
Mm-hmm.
parent not so much.
Yeah.
So the conflict there, like which, do I pick sides, or how do I stay focused, stay on track? And then you spoke about just that church setting again. There are church settings that have been like that over the years, where instead of preaching the love of God, it's, if you don't do this, that, other, you're going to burn in hell. So it's a scare tactic versus an embracing of love of God.
Right.
And so, and unfortunately we've lost potential believers in God because they've been turned off by that.
Yeah.
That so I guess abrasive, aggressive approach, if you will. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's unfortunate. Actually, I would like for you to speak to that. Just to for anybody who may have been turned off to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because of coming up in that type of church environment, and even for yourself, I'm just kind of curious to know, like, how do you even bounce back from that? And I'm sure, again, we'll delve into this a little bit more, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that stood out to me the most of what you shared so far is when you spoke to about, finding out that the pastor in this case was a pedophile and you happen to be one of the victims
Mm-hmm.
in your case. But more importantly, not just so much that you were a victim, but that you had the courage to speak out. So I'm curious to know what what led you to say, you know what, despite being in a church where, like you stated,
Mm-hmm.
I must have did something bad to deserve this,
Mm-hmm.
feeling that way, but at the same time speaking out to it. What led you to say, I need to speak out to this? I need to let somebody know that this happened to me, and perhaps maybe it happened to other people. What was the motivating drive that led you to do that?
It was actually just some very dramatic circumstances that happened. It happened. I told you that I was sexually molested, so it happened like a Friday. And then the next Friday, he sent for me again because like they treated this man like he was a king. He didn't
Hmm.
do anything for himself. He had what they called the leadership, which was three young women that served them like he was a king. And he had a driver and all that. So he sent his driver for me. And a lot of the members in the church, they were brainwashed. And my mom, she was one of the ones that was brainwashed. And they never questioned because he did a lot of grooming prior to the incident happening. And he called that grooming special counseling. So we would go into the room and talk with him and talk with him. He would ask us very uncomfortable questions like, are we dealing with lust, and just different things like
Hmm.
that to try and to it's just grooming. It's grooming. Like, why are you 40 years old, you're asking a 12, 13-year old, is she dealing with lust? Like, that's not your place. But things like that were happening, but the parents never questioned what he was talking about with us in that room. So the morning that he sent for me, um, his driver came and he got me, and then I was like, this is not going to happen to me again. So when I get there, I'm just gonna lie and tell him that it's my time of the month, and I'm because I'm not gonna go through this again. And I was just very nervous because I knew lying was wrong, and then lying to the pastor who had
Hmm.
instilled all that fear in us. I was
Right.
just like just outdone. But then what happened was I got there and he started his stuff, and I was like, I'm on my period. That's what I said. And then it was fine. He said it was fine, and he sent me down the street to one of his another church member that lived down the street so I can finish getting ready for school. I remember it was the last day of my ninth grade year in high school. It was the very last day, so I went down the street and I kept, I was finishing getting ready, like doing my hair for school. But one of my friends, who she was the same age as me, like we were getting ready, went to school together and stuff. So in the midst of that, he sent for her younger sister, who is 6 years old. And I knew that whatever he was going to do to me that he had done before, he was going to do that to that girl. And so I told the sister, who, she was 14 years old like me, I told her, and then she, told her mom. And then from there, that's how all the news
Mm.
came out. Everything just blew up. They called the leadership, those three women, and then all the other church members found out about it. And it just kind of just spiraled out of control. And I just went into shock, like, honestly. And he came running down the street asking me, what have I done? When
Mm.
everything came out, he asked me, what have I done? And so that was really it was just like dramatic. It was so dramatic. Like when I tell it, I'm like, I can't even comprehend, like, just the stuff that happened. But from there, then the family happened to live next door to a policeman. and he heard the commotion of everything happening. And so he came out, and I told him what happened. The policeman, I believe he was some kind of detective, and he arrested him and, took him to jail. And then, everything else happened with the nurses and the doctors and the court and all that. And one of the other things is because it was his first offense, even though 8 girls came forward, he only got 5 years in prison. And he
Wow.
only had to do 2.5 years, because he got out like half the time with good time or whatever. And word on the street was he was messed up in prison and contracted a disease, and he passed away shortly after that. But he
Mhm.
went back to that same neighborhood, and me and one of my sisters actually ran into him after that. And I remember I was about 16, 15, 16 years old, and I was so enraged when I saw him.
Mhm.
I'm like, he's still on the street, being he could do this to other girls or whatever. And I picked up a stick like out of the ground. I don't know, 5'1", 100 pounds. He like 6'4", over 200 pounds. I'm like, but I would have fought him if my sister would
Right.
have my sister would have let me. But it was so troubling for me. I felt like he got the easy way out because he died. He didn't have to. I felt like he didn't have to suffer, because we were left with all the suffering, the struggle, rebellious and running streets, running wild or whatever. Our faith was damaged and all things. And so for a long time, I believe that he got the easy way out, which led me to um, my God moment, which was 14 years later. But yeah, that was a long way of answering that question of how things came out. But yeah.
No, I appreciate you going through that detail, and again for your transparency, because one of the things that I would like for you to share with
Mm-hmm.
our listeners, we may not necessarily have a 14-year-old with an opportunity to listen to this, but
Mm-hmm.
for somebody that's a parent of a child, whether it's a young lady or even a young boy,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say are I guess the warning signs, if you will, that parents need to either be aware of about their children, or that they should perhaps share with their children that, hey, if you have an adult asking you these questions or approaching you in this manner,
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of the signal that, hey, you need to alert an adult in this situation, because this doesn't sound like a healthy
Right.
thing that's transpiring, that in fact it may be one that's leading to an experience that you and some of the other young ladies went through. What would be your advisement to tell people on that, as sort of the warning signs to pick up on?
I would just say to listen to your children. A lot of times, even us, as when we were young, I believe just our generation and period, our voices were shut down.
Hmm.
We weren't allowed to express ourselves. We weren't allowed to express our emotions. We didn't learn how to articulate something as simple as how we feel. And so to just listen to your children, and to just, I would say, even talk to them as young as 3 years old about boundaries, about conversations, about not keeping secrets. And even this didn't come from me, but it's just a revelation that I believe somebody else had. We like to say stranger danger, but a lot of times when people are molested, it's not by strangers. So
Mm.
we shouldn't be saying stranger danger, but look out for strange behavior.
Hmm.
Like if it's strange behavior, they're asking, they want to get that child alone, or they want to offer them candy, and you're just different things. Ask your children questions, and don't shut down their voices. Listen to them, and if something, reassure them that they are safe, that talking to you is a safe space for them. They can talk to you, they can confide in you, because the minute you shut down that voice, then I mean, they won't share anything with you. They won't tell you if somebody is harming them, or trying to hurt them or something like that. And let them know who let them know who can come in and do something, whether it's a teacher, whether it's anybody in a church, or whether it's a family member. And it's a lot of things just happen in these families, And I won't even say especially African American family. It happens to all family. It doesn't even, it's not even, race or, race based. A lot of these things happen with someone, a family, somebody, a family member or somebody close to the family. And I believe it's like something like in the 90s percentile, that when someone's molested, a child is molested, it's from someone who knows the family or somebody in the family. So
Hmm.
just listen to your children. Don't shut down their voices. Create a safe space for them to be able to share. And also, you teach them what boundaries are.
That's definitely sound advice. I like the boundaries conversation. I like earlier when you talked about, you explained the grooming, what
Yeah.
that looks like and what that means.
Hmm.
Because I think that's another, kind of warning flag. Why are you having this kind of conversation with me at such a young age? Things that
Right.
I'm not even supposed to even be knowing about or talking about. It definitely not with somebody that's not, say, my parent or
Right.
something of that nature.
Hmm.
So I definitely appreciate you bringing that up and just reminding listeners that, hey, it's never really too early to have that conversation. You said, hey, as early as 3. I mean, so you're, in essence, you're saying the moment that they can understand basic
Hmm.
conversations, you need to actually start that conversation.
Yeah.
And then,
And
as you
one
stated, I'm sorry, go
And
ahead.
one other thing I want to say before I forget, about as young as 3 years old, and just being mindful. Don't try to pretty up the body parts like cookie and wee wee and pee pee, and because say what it is biologically, what the name of those things is, because there was a story once of a little young girl telling the teacher that her uncle took her cookie or touched her cookie, but and she kept saying it to the teacher, but the teacher couldn't,
Right.
make out. And then she made it. She told the parent one day, and then I think the parent made the connection that she calls that her cookie,
Hmm.
and a case stemmed from that, because she was being molested by her uncle and trying to tell her teacher about it, but nobody picked up on the warning signs because you're giving it cutesy names and stuff. No, call it what it is. Call it what it is. And like these children, I say, like, even over the last since 2020, these kids are learning faster. They're picking up on things more and more, and so, like, don't think that they're too young to understand something. Yeah.
I totally agree with that, and I love that you said don't pretty it up. Don't
Yeah.
say what it is. Say what it
Hmm.
is. And this is why I like having these conversations about starting off with your beginning,
Yeah.
because what clicked to my mind as you and I were just talking about this is, like, I'm thinking about your journey, and I'm saying, you being the woman of God that you are today,
Hmm.
and what you speak to in terms of God's messaging, you're about not making it pretty and not making it. If it's sin, you calling it sin. If
Hmm.
it's this, you're calling it this. If it's that, you're calling it that. You're not trying to sugarcoat it to make people feel good, because
Right.
that's been one of the challenges
Hmm.
with a lot of churches. Unfortunately, is that, and that's not a knock against church in general. We know
Right.
that all churches are different, but
Right.
there are some churches that like to, as we've heard, whether it's preaching the prosperity gospel or
Hmm.
preaching only the topics that make people feel warm and fuzzy inside,
Right.
versus telling us, in other words, it's kind of that old saying of, the challenge of telling me what I want to hear versus telling me what I need to hear.
Yeah.
Even if it
Absolutely.
stings a little bit, sometimes we need that sting to be transformed, to be rectified. And I believe, even in some of what you told me that you've gone through
Hmm.
as a young person, as a child,
Hmm.
it's almost like it was, while it was uncomfortable, while it was unfortunate that you had to go through it,
Hmm.
I don't believe it was by accident that you went
Right.
through it, because you had to experience something of this nature to catapult you into where you are today, and trying to help people understand
Hmm.
who God is, what he's all about,
Hmm.
why he operates the way he does and wants us to live lives the way he wants us to live life. You had to know what both sides of that looks like. And
Hmm.
again, not prettying it up, not
Yeah.
making it, not sugarcoating it to make it feel good for everybody,
Hmm.
but also not taking it to the extreme of what you went up in, where you're just preaching, this hell and damnation all
Right.
the time,
Hmm.
but also letting people know that there are consequences to our actions and our decisions, as well as there's blessings that can be waiting for us as a result of those those same decisions and moves that we make in life. So I feel like there again, I'm piecing it all together, even in this
Yeah.
early stage, as to why because a lot of times people go through their storms of life, whatever they are,
Hmm.
and we're so quick to say, I wish I never went through that.
Yeah.
Well, it may have not felt good,
Hmm.
but there was a reason why you went through it. We just don't
Hmm.
always make that connection, and I feel like we're starting to make that connection even in the early stages of your journey
Hmm.
with that. So
Hmm.
definitely appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that's definitely important. It's important. It's a sensitive conversation to have, but it's
Yeah.
a necessary conversation to have because,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, in these days and times, it's just the world that we're in, and
Hmm.
it's more prevalent. And like you said, kids are getting exposed to stuff much more sooner
Hmm.
than what we were. I.e., the internet
Yeah.
and everything else is just too accessible. Things
Yeah.
that we used to have to sneak to try to see or hear,
Right. Right.
it's just like right out there for them.
Hmm.
Plain and simple. So
Hmm.
and then I'm thinking too, you said that after this incident takes place, the next 14 years of your life, you're dealing with this whole process, and it's just sort of sort of a reckless, kind of out of control
Hmm.
cycle. Because again, one of the things that wasn't available back then, or wasn't a big thing in the black community in particular, was, we didn't grow up talking about let's go to counseling.
Right.
you know, um, you know, counseling was always deemed as that's for crazy people.
Crazy people.
Even if
Yep.
you went through traumatic experiences like what you did, it was one of those things where you just need to suck it up and get over it, and
Hmm.
it happened. You be all right. Move forward. And so again, that's why that's why I'm kind of lingering on this because it's so critical that we're having that conversation. And again, back to conversations. You said keeping that keeping that open dialogue where I can come to my parent because I'm thinking when you first had that first encounter with the pastor,
Hmm.
I didn't hear you say, "Hey, I talked to my mom about it."
No.
So I can only conclude, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that you didn't feel that that was a safe space that you could go to your mother
Hmm.
and say, "Mom, I think I've been inappropriately dealt with by my
Hmm.
pastor."
Hmm.
So again, and you should have been able, and that's not a knock against your mom. It was just like you
Right.
said, she was, like many people in that kind of situation. She was believing the pastor and following the church, and
Yep.
she was thinking everything was good, and
Hmm.
so you didn't know if I say this, will my mom,
Yeah.
think I'm lying?
Hmm.
Will she just be in denial about it, or will
Yeah.
it on the flip side of it, will it break her faith
Yeah.
altogether to where she's turned off by God because I say something? So it's almost like a damn if you do, damn if you don't kind of
Right.
situation. Even for a 14-year-old, you
Right.
can
Right.
feel that way, and you
And
shouldn't
what's
feel
sad
that
is,
way.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. What's sad is a 14-year-old shouldn't be in that predicament.
Right. You shouldn't even
Shouldn't
be
have to
there.
make a decision like that. So yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So again, thank you so much for your transparency and sharing that. So I want to go a little bit further. Again, you kind of gave us the kind of the beginning stages, some highlights and some not so highlights.
Hmm.
But as we move along, and of course we venture off into our adulthood, there's going to come a point in time where through our life challenges that we get hit with something that just hits a little different.
Yeah.
That this is a challenge, this is a weight, this is an obstacle that I'm not able to just navigate my way through it like I normally do. I'm not able to just fix it real quick.
Hmm.
Sometimes we get hit with things that are so overwhelming where we start to doubt, like, how am I going to make it through this? Even if you are a believer, you
Yeah.
may be like, I don't know, God, I'm not sure. I feel like I'm out here on this island by myself. I don't know how I'm going to overcome this. I don't see a way through.
Hmm.
So with that said, tell me about a time that you experienced in life where, you found yourself in such a situation where you were hit with something that you didn't see this coming and you didn't know how you were going to get through it. But nevertheless, here you were in the midst of that moment trying to figure it all out. We know you
Hmm.
made it through because you're here today to speak about it.
Right.
But if you would, tell us about one of those instances in life where you found yourself in such a situation and how you were able to navigate your way through that.
Yeah, I called I called the moment, I call it my God moment.
Hmm.
It's when I say 14 years later, but between the time I was 14 and 18 years old, my life I kind of spent out of control, just very rebellious, running the streets, promiscuous, smoking weed. I got into gambling, like some very abusive relationships. Like I was drugged in a club once. Like it's just like so many things happened in between that time, that caused me to, that caught, just, it just wore on my soul. And I couldn't, because I didn't have an outlet for any of these things. I kind of just carried it. I carried all those burdens. I carried, from not healing from the, molestation, not healing from, growing up in that divisive home, not dealing with all this. So I got into the point where, like, as I said, I was in a lot of relationships, and at this point, I was in a relationship that was abusive, it was narcissistic, like it was everything. And so here I am at 28 years old. I am sitting in the car on my lunch break on the suicide hotline. And so I didn't, in hindsight, I didn't want to like kill myself. I don't believe, die really. I just wanted the pain to be over. And the only way I knew, because like you said, counseling wasn't like top of anybody's charts, and where we came from, and it wasn't like even a thing that anybody ever mentioned, to deal with the trauma or things that we've dealt with. So my only, what I thought was the only solution was to just be gone. And so I'm sitting on the hotline talking to the stranger who's telling me my life is worth it and different things like that. I'm bawling. But in that moment, I sensed, or I heard like the Holy Spirit say, "Daughter."
Hmm.
And that's when I had my moment, because it shook me. It was something that, just, it still sits with me today, because I was like, after all I've done, after all I've been through, you still see me as your daughter. And so that's what started me on my journey to healing. And so, from that moment, I began to just walk with the Lord, and to just, allow Him to dig up all those different things. I didn't realize in that moment, I didn't realize the source of my pain. It started from childhood trauma, but I also recognized the source of my strength while I was still living and walking, and while I still was moving and had my being, because He was the source of my strength. Now, in between that time, I still was going to church, because, it's very, grew up in the religion and all that. So church was always top of mind, so even though I was in full blown sin, doing all these other kind of crazy things, I still was going to church. And I kept God at a distance, because I was like, it was one of your people that did this to me. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to really trust you, but I'm not going to, totally give up on you. Like when I need something, I'll pray. And when I get sick, I'll pray and do these things. So I kept them at bay, but, um, I never just like gave up on God, and so I'm happy that He didn't give up on me either, because in that moment, like I said, I recognized the source of my strength, and so He began to work in me all the different things that I had been through, all the different experiences, and it was just like a matter of Him helping me to recall all the things, and basically just digging up that stuff from my soul so it can be healed, like having to forgive and having to, deal with all the trauma of abuse, and, not feeling loved. And I like to say this to people, because we try to, fill our lives with voids of different things, whether it's a relationship, like a romantic relationship, whether it's, college degrees, whether it's, being making all kind of money and doing all these other things. But when I was sitting in a car on the suicide hotline, I had accomplished some things, and I wore my mask pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody would think or know that I had been through all these different things. Like I had my master's degree, I was living in a house, my daughter's in private school, like all these good things. But here I am on a suicide hotline. That don't make sense to, a logical mind. Like why
Mm-hmm.
she has all this stuff, so why she's still broken, why she's still not happy, is because none of those things fill that void. And
Right.
what I needed was Jesus Christ, and needed Him working in and through me to help me heal from all the stuff that I had been through. So that's when my moment started to my journey to healing started, and also how my journey to ending up becoming a counselor, a Christian counselor, because I needed somebody
Hmm.
like me back then. And so God highlighted that, even though, a lot of these things were motivated by, with Satan, and also a consequence of some of the bad decisions that I made. The Bible says, what the enemy meant for evil, God can turn it for your good. And so all those things that he thought that would ruin me actually catapulted me into my purpose. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Wow, wow. What a powerful story. And again, what you said, what we just been talking about all along is that you had to go through
Mhm.
what you went through. It didn't make sense as a 14-year-old.
Right.
It didn't make sense even in the subsequent years thereafter. But then here you were on the brink,
Hmm.
suicide line,
Hmm.
just even the fact that you were even contemplating the idea of just
Right.
no longer existing.
Hmm.
You were at that breaking point, but then you were reminded
Hmm.
of who you belong to
Yes.
and that you were loved unconditionally by him. Him
Yeah.
being God, that
Yes.
he hadn't forgotten about you. He's been there all along.
Hmm.
But because he saw the gift in you and what the works that he had in store for you to do years later,
Yeah.
he knew that this was a trying journey that you had to go through, but you had to go through it to position yourself to
Hmm.
be ready to serve other people that he was going to bring to
Hmm.
you, that were going to be hurting people, broken people that
Yeah.
needed to talk to somebody like you who could relate, who could
Hmm.
understand what they're talking about, not just be the textbook counselor, but
Right.
somebody who's, I've been there and done that. I know
Right.
what it feels to be mistreated, unloved, abandoned,
Hmm.
my voice being silenced, all of the things that people who go through traumatic experiences feel
Yeah.
and go through, to be able to relate to somebody that, okay, you see me where I'm at, and then to have on the back of that a godly foundational basis
Yeah.
makes all the difference in the world.
Hmm.
And so and really the key word that you said that stood out to me as you were talking about that God moment is that that word is forgiveness.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that until you forgive,
Hmm.
that's when the healing process
Hmm.
truly begins.
Yeah.
And so you had been harboring all of that hurt, all of that pain, all of those years. And then God had to bring you to this moment where you basically had to, regurgitate it all out. You put it
Hmm.
all out there. Let's
Hmm.
let's take, like you said, let's take off the mask of the professional, highly educated
Hmm.
sister who got it going on and things in life are wonderful and lovely. And you had to strip it down to its
Yeah.
bare essence,
Hmm.
and to not only forgive those who hurt you,
Hmm.
but even bigger than that, for you to forgive you,
Yeah.
because you had made yourself feel like you had done something wrong, and you were penalizing yourself, you were punishing yourself,
Hmm.
and you're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I need to forgive me for, you know, whether it was bad decisions I may have made or whatever. It doesn't. We're not saying excuse my behavior, but we're saying,
Right.
hey, we're human and we make mistakes. We
Hmm.
make wrong judgments, bad moves. We
Hmm.
all have. I've been guilty of plenty.
Hmm.
We could be on here for hours talking about all my bad moves, and like you said, while still being in church.
Yeah. Hmm.
So it can happen even to a believer. It's
Hmm.
just but at some point you have to kind of let that out and quit trying to do life all by yourself, because we have a
Right.
God that wants to be in relationship with you, that wants to walk through that storm with you, to cover you, to protect you,
Hmm.
to navigate you through it. So when you come out of the other side of it,
Hmm.
you do so still standing upright. The storm didn't take you out. It
Right.
didn't consume you.
Hmm.
And on top of that, you're stronger and you're wiser as a result of the storm, as
Hmm.
what you've gone through. So now that I got all this stuff out of me, and now that I have a different and clearer perspective about it,
Hmm.
now I can be used in the way that he needs to use me.
Hmm.
And he can take what was my pain
Hmm.
and use it as an opportunity to bless other people,
Yeah.
to come alongside them accordingly, as you're doing right now in your counseling mode, in your or just I'm sure just in people who just may know you as friend. They
Hmm.
can come to you and and can get some godly, soundly, non-judgmental advice from you that is authentic and true. So very, very powerful, what you spoke to here, and just the connection again to all of the what led up to it. That journey is everything.
Yeah.
It's everything, and we can't. We can't dismiss it. We can't say, I wish it didn't happen. No, it
Right.
needed to. If
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't happen, then you're not where you are right now. You
Right.
may be somewhere completely different, and not necessarily a good thing if you
Right.
don't go through all of that and experience it and understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in full circle. So again, thank you for that. So Rachel, I'm interested in knowing. So I know we've talked a lot about, some of the challenges that you've gone through and how how you've had to deal with certain circumstances. But I'm curious, just in general,
Mm-hmm.
when you are faced with challenging moments, again, whether it's something major like some of the stories that you've told, or even, like I said, even if it's just basic everyday stuff, annoyances, like it could just be, it's just today,
Mm-hmm.
it's Tuesday, and I got this in front of me that I got to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
What is your process for dealing with those adversity moments, those challenging moments? How do you like to face those situations while keeping a level head, but being able to walk and process your way through it? What is your way of doing it? How do you go about making that so?
Yeah, so just over the years, just learned. I mean, of course, this wasn't just like a overnight process. Just what happened when I talk about my God moment. That happened in 2010, and so I've been on this journey, just like learning and growing since then. What I'm just like over the last 12, 13 years. But as I've grown, and matured in the Lord, I've just learned to just give it to God, give it up to God right away. And that's something that I had to learn. Like I said, it's years. I didn't know this like in the first five, 5 to 10 years, really. But
Mm-hmm.
just giving it up to Him right away, because what I've learned is I don't ever want to feel that burden again. I don't want to ever feel that heartbreak again. And I know that the heartbreak and all those feelings didn't come from God. So I know that when I him
I think I lost your sound momentarily there, Rachel. I'll let you work that out. Here we are on the Blessings and Streets podcast, having a very deep conversation with our guest, Rachel Carey. She's working on some technical issues right now. So this has been an awesome conversation. She's been very transparent, very open, but just reminding us that we don't have to carry the weight of life alone. There are burdens, there are loads, there are stresses that we will encounter in life that are just simply too big for us to do by ourselves, and we weren't meant to. But when you have that relationship with God, God has a way of again covering you, coming alongside you, giving you that discernment that you need, so you'll know what to pick up and what not to pick up, so that you're not again walking around through life stressing yourself out, worrying, being overburdened, being consumed by the storm of the moment, because the storms are going to come. It's not a matter of if, but when. But there is a way for you to prepare for that in advance. And the way you do it is to stay in constant prayer with God, to stay in His Word, to stay in relationship, stay in that lane that He's in. And I promise you, when you do that, He has a way of extending to you a joy, a peace, a calm that is like nothing else that you could ever imagine. I mean, even when you find yourself drifting into that moment of fear and anxiety and stressing out and worrying, you can instantly access His joy, His peace and calm, and it'll just instantaneously make you feel better about the situation, because you're reminded once again that I'm not in this journey by myself. I'm not doing it on my own. I have a God who is able, more than able, to overcome anything that I could ever face or imagine having to deal with. So it's such a critical thing that we embrace these lessons of God and understand why that relationship is so essential to navigating our lives. That doesn't mean that every day of our lives is going to be rough going. There's going to obviously be moments in time where we're going to experience good times and celebrations and joy and happiness. But even in the dark moments, you have to, as the Bible teaches us, you have to count it all joy, even in those dark moments, because again, there is a purpose in our pain. There's a reason for it all. So, and
can you
Rachel, she's yes. We
Oh,
got you back, Rachel. No problem.
okay.
No problem. I was just kind of recapping what you said so far, but go ahead. You go ahead and finish what you were speaking before your sound went out.
Oh, okay. I don't know where. I think I was. I forgot what I was talking about. um,
We
I
were
think
just
we're talking about.
you had spoken to just kind of learning how to give it up to God,
Yes.
and not carrying that weight around anymore.
Hmm.
Not he's saying, you know what, I don't want to experience that anymore. Where I'm trying to do it all by myself when I got a God whose his
Hmm.
shoulders are much more broader than mine, so he can carry that weight for us, and I don't
Yes.
have to. I don't have to drag that along with me because I got him.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, but that's where you had left off.
Okay, yes. So but of course, it took me years to get to that point, to just be able to trust in God, that I can trust Him with whatever it is that I'm going through. So I know that with Him or in Him, I don't have to deal with that heartbreak or heartache anymore. And so I've learned to quickly just give it over to God, quickly pray, quickly forgive. That's one of the greatest things, to quickly forgive. Like, I don't give him anything a shelf life. I'm not trying to hold bitterness or hold hatred or hold, like, keep it there for a little while, and then when I feel like it, because even like forgiveness, I've been learning just about that as I've been counseling people, that forgiveness is a decision. It's not a feeling. You may not feel like forgiving somebody. Like, let your feelings catch up, but decide to forgive them, because the Word of God tells us, if you don't forgive them, then I'm not going to forgive you. And I don't want to be in that kind of hot water with God. So I'm going to quickly forgive you. My feelings may take a while to catch up to doing that, but I'm going to forgive you, and to not hold any bitterness or hatred or anger in my heart. I release them into the freedom of my forgiveness, because I don't want to hinder anything that God has for me. Hinder me. I don't want to hinder any seasons of being in the wilderness longer, or having to take the test again, or do any of those things. So for me, I just learned to quickly do it, to quickly obey God, like radical obedience. And I don't always get it right, but I'm learning, and that's what I've learned to do, and what I'm continuing to learn to do, just quickly obey God. Yeah.
And I love your emphasis on the quickness. I know for myself, when I pray in the morning, I usually do it when I'm walking the dog earlier in the morning and I'm talking to God. And that's one of the things that I pray on every morning, about wanting to get to a place where I'm much more swifter in my willingness to be obedient to what it is that God would have for me to do. That when he gives me that next mission, that next assignment, that next journey, that next task, that I'm not sitting here going back and forth with him about why me, why this, why now. I need all the details. I need to know.
Yeah.
Just knowing that he's running the show and that he's orchestrated this should be enough for me.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's a process.
Yeah.
There have been some things that I've been swift with moving on, and there's been others that I've been dragging my feet on, trying to, get God to do it my way, to
Right.
make it
Right.
easy for me, to lay it out all nice and perfect for me. And he's saying, all you got to do is understand that I'm with you.
Yeah.
So even if you hit some rough patches along the way, don't trip, because I'm with you. You're not by yourself in this.
Right.
And so I think that swiftness is so key. And then, like you said, that forgiveness. I can't drive home enough about the importance of that. And I think it's important for people to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean that you condone the behavior.
Right.
If you've been wronged, you've been mistreated, you're not saying that if I forgive that person, that I'm saying that I accept what they did was no. You can have total issue with it. You could be completely against it.
Right.
But again, that forgiveness, as the saying goes, that forgiveness is for you. So that you don't get stuck, so that you don't get consumed, as you talked about. So I don't stay in the wilderness no longer than I need to. I'm not giving. I love that you said I don't give it a shelf life. I'm not trying to do all that. I need to let that go. And like I said, I'll deal with my feelings in its proper perspective. I mean, and again, even with that, you're still human. You still have a right to have feelings, whether it's to cry about it, to be angry about it, to be frustrated about it, to stump your feet about it or whatever, to scream out loud about it. That's okay.
Yeah.
Have that moment. Just don't get stuck there.
Right.
That's just don't get stuck. Because when you get stuck, that's where the enemy likes for you to be. That's when the enemy can throw in the depression and the anxiety and the sleepless nights and the ulcers and all of the other negative things that affect you mentally, emotionally, physically, and even spiritually.
Right.
Can even draw you to the point to where you get so angry with God
Mm-hmm.
to where you don't want to have nothing to do with him no more.
Right.
The enemy would have nothing more to would be no more pleasure to him for that
Right.
to happen, for you to
Mm-hmm.
get so in your feelings,
Mm-hmm.
instead of seeing the big picture and seeing, more importantly, who's running the show, who's in charge, who is your source,
Right.
that you can count on. So
Mm-hmm.
very good points that you bring up there.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rachel, if you had an opportunity, knowing what you've been through, and I know other stories of triumphs that you've overcome that you haven't even shared,
Yeah.
in our podcast. I mean, if people only knew some of the other things that you've have overcome and encountered over life, but if you had an opportunity to speak to the younger version of you,
Mm-hmm.
that young lady who, you know, had somebody that she trusted
Mm-hmm.
violate that trust, had some, went through the experiences of, feeling like, you were being silenced, that your voice was not being heard, and it just caused you to act out in just in just the wildest of ways, just because, not because you were necessarily trying to be that way. It's just
Mm-hmm.
you just didn't know how to release. You didn't know how to
Mm-hmm.
connect. If you had a chance to talk to her again, or again talk to somebody that's like her right now, a young lady right now who's just lost her way,
Mm-hmm.
and she's just trying to pull it all together and learn to embrace forgiveness and learning to mature in her walk with Christ. What would be your words of encouragement or advisement that you would give to somebody who's kind of been in that same situation, or maybe currently in the same situation that you used to be in at that time?
Mm-hmm. I would just say to, I mean, it's easy to say to trust in the Lord, but I would say to start the process, maybe jot down some of the things that you've experienced, jot down some of the things that you wish you have heard, like from your parents, jot down some of the things like from your guardians or from, from anybody, to just make note of those things and then turn them into prayer points. And while, like, because sometimes we hold on to different things from people who are like not even no longer here, who we still harbor this unforgiveness or resentment, or abandonment, rejection issues, whatever it may be. Just jot that stuff down and make them prayer points and ask the Lord to help you to restore those areas of your soul so you can move forward. um, Help you, ask the Lord to help you to see people the way that He sees them. That was very instrumental in my healing from forgiveness. Having to see that pastor the way that God sees them, having to see my parents the way that God sees them, and the way that He sees them is as people who are in need of a savior.
Mm.
He doesn't see them as Rachel mama or Rachel daddy who didn't raise them right, and then all these other things or whatever. He sees them as people in need of a savior. So when we tend to change our perspective of how we're seeing people, I think it's easier to forgive them when we see them the way that God sees them. But what I would tell that young lady is to just keep holding on, like it's not always going to be this way, to just stay encouraged. Like the storm, these cliche sayings like the storm doesn't last always. It's true. They don't last always. Like joy comes in the morning. And so to understand, I believe that when we unpack those things from our soul, we can better see where God is taking us, um, on these journeys. We can better see who created us to be when we unpack our souls from all that different things, all the different trauma and all the different things that we've experienced. Because right now, like if you're dealing with all this trauma, like all the things that I've been through, had I not addressed those issues, then I wouldn't be walking in the purpose that God had called me to, because all of it covered my identity. It
Mm.
covered how God saw me. It covered how I saw myself. It basically just told me I was worthless. I was unloved. I'm not lovable. All these different things, but because God uncovered it, my identity in Him was uncovered, and so now I can walk freely in who He has called me to be. Because I know that a lot of what I've experienced, it wasn't about me. It was to get me to the promise, and He promised that I would be in good health and I would prosper, and that I would, be a servant for him in his kingdom. And I know what that entails. It entails me helping other women who have been through a lot of different trauma, counseling them, counseling whoever it may be, young women, young girls or whoever it is, or even young men and older men, whoever it may be, to preach and teach, to just share this testimony of different things that I've experienced. So just make note of it. If you have to keep your journal, but just to begin to unpack some of those things so you won't allow them to consume your life, because a lot of us walk through this world, we feeling aimlessly, we feel purposeless and different things like that. But once we have all that stuff, once we have our identity uncovered, we can better walk in who God has created us to be. So yeah.
Love that. Love that. You spoke to having that identity. You
Yeah.
spoke to, seeing people how God sees people. That, because that's what it's ultimately all about. How does God see it? I want to do it like God does. Now we know we can't be God,
Yeah.
but we can surely operate in a way that has us mirroring the way that He would have us to operate our lives. How like whether it's dealing with forgiveness, whether it's dealing with loving people unconditionally, and that doesn't just mean the people that we hang out with and we like a whole bunch, but also people who may have done some things to us or said some things to us that were hurtful.
Yeah.
He loves those people unconditionally as well. He sees people differently. Because he created us. He's our Father, and so
Right.
He wants us to embrace that same thing. And it's not easy.
Right.
And I love the fact that you talked about how we're not here just trying to be cliche with it, saying we'll just pray to the Lord and everything will be all right. Not to minimize the power of prayer, because we know that there is significant power in that, but we're also saying that there's some things that you have to do within yourself that God wants you to work through and process through,
Yeah.
so He can get you to, as you said, get you to the promise
Yes.
that He has for you, to
Yeah.
get you to that, ultimately get you to that destination that He wants you at, where you now can be utilized as God intended to utilize. The whole reason why He created you to begin with, the whole reason why you went through all of the ups and downs and everything in between to get to this moment in time. So now your gift can be fully tapped into, and you can be used for the advancement of His kingdom, for the helping of His people
Yeah.
out there, people that you may not have met yet, that you're going to meet and whose lives you're going to change. Even in the midst of this podcast, as we talked about at the very beginning, I truly do believe somebody will listen to this and will be blessed by your story and your sharing of what you stated today. So we cannot undermine, we cannot minimize or dismiss the power of our struggles, our journeys, our challenges,
Yeah.
because it's all a part of the collective process in that relationship with God, and ultimately what it is that He would have for us to do with our lives. So good
Absolutely.
stuff, Rachel. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. So before I let you go, I do, of course, want to take an opportunity to love on you, to celebrate you, to acknowledge you. So if you got anything going on right now, I know, again, you got your work, your business that you got going on and some other things, please do share with us. What can we what's to look forward to right now that you got going on, or any new news, any new happenings that are going on that we need to know about you and connect with you? How can we do that?
Well, right now, as we stated at the top of the show, I am a Christian counselor, and I do these sessions. It's called an Introduction to Inner Healing, and it's basically to help people uncover their identities. There was a person that God created before all the trauma happened. So what I do is try to help people unpack those things so they can see who God created and walk in that. So the reason or purpose for these sessions is to help people recognize that the reason they're being held back is because they haven't dealt with the trauma that's in their soul. So it's called Introduction to Inner Healing. And my next session will be December 20th at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. And I do that I do it just through Zoom or whatever. I send people a link, like you need the link to register. So I trust that I can send you the link, or, you can put it somewhere in the description. Um,
Absolutely.
for people to be able to register for that. But it's a Wednesday, December 20th, 7:30 p.m. And it's usually about an hour. And I basically make the case for inner healing from a biblical perspective. Because, counseling is still kind of taboo. people are starting to, break into it and seeing therapy and going through therapy and all this stuff now. But I want to give a biblical case, make a biblical case for why inner healing is important in the life of a believer. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. But I also offer one-on-one individual counseling. And if you want to visit my website, it's called Pathway to Freedom Ministry.com, pathway to freedom ministry.com. And so you can follow me on Facebook. I have the page at Pathway to Freedom Ministry, as well as Instagram. It's at Pathway to Freedom Ministry.
That is awesome. That is awesome, man. And something else you didn't share that we need to celebrate. I saw just recently. Wasn't your daughter just recently baptized?
Yes, she was baptized. I believe was it last week? A couple of weeks ago. I don't. Time is going by so fast. Yes, but yeah. So my daughter, she's on. I have her working with her. I'm on a journey with her. She's on a journey with God. Just trying to encourage her so she can be able to speak to her generation, the Gen Z generation. I may not be able to reach them, but kids like her, in her generation can share about the goodness of God. And what he's doing in her life as well. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I kind of caught that clip and I saw you standing by her side, and I could just see the joy in your in your face to be able to witness that. I mean, as a parent, anytime you can see your child give their lives to Christ is an experience that just, you don't really have the words to truly capture it. It's just so for you to be present and experience that is a wonderful thing to know. Not only that your child is, reserved her space when this life comes to an end, but even in this life, she's heading it. She's leading that life with the proper head at the forefront, which is God Himself. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So Rachel, it goes without saying, it has been a pleasure having this time with you on the podcast. I appreciate the stories that you shared and the journey and words of wisdom and insight. It has been a blessing to me, and I'm certainly it's going to be a blessing to those who tune in to this episode. So I appreciate it so much, and please know that you have an open invite at any time to come back on the show for more discussions on some topics that I think can further bless some individuals as well. So just know that you have that open invitation available to you.
Okay.
And of course, for those who are listening, if you've enjoyed our episode today on the Blessings in the Streets podcast, I encourage you to please subscribe, please share it, please like, please comment. Let people know that this is what Blessings in the Streets podcast is all about. It's about inspiring and encouraging, being authentic, being transparent in the sharing of our journeys and our stories with you, with the hopes that it will impact your lives, that you'll have some nuggets that you can take away to apply immediately. And just reminding you that a relationship with God is not something that's just a trendy thing to do, that it's a necessity in your life. Because I promise you, and I know that Rachel can co-sign on this and saying that a relationship with God, when you make that decision, I promise you it's the best decision that you'll ever make in life. And you'll be reminded of what it means to be unconditionally loved and to be worthy, to be cared for and watched over and looked after in ways that you can just never experience from just regular folk. Because our God is just not regular folk. He is our creator. He is our father. And he just loves us so much and just wants the best for us. And we have gifts that he has placed in us that he wants us to be able to tap into and utilize to be a blessing to others, as well as be a blessing to ourselves along the way. So, again, with that said, I appreciate you tuning in. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast. And this is the place where your story is your glory, where relationships are relevant, and where your journey is your joy. Tune in next time. I hope to see you. I hope you were inspired and encouraged by today's podcast episode. God bless. Keep fighting that good fight. Don't give up. Your storm is not the end of your story. It's just part of the process. It's part of that journey. So keep that in mind. Stay strong. Fight that good fight. And just trust in God and lean into him, because he is your ultimate and only source that you need to have to be delivered through those difficult times, as well as to share in those wonderful and joyous times as well in life. So until next time, take care of yourselves.